This week on the Stereo Image, I'm really excited to talk with John Kiehl. John's one of my oldest friends, and he is one of the great recording engineers and one of the principals in soundtrack recording studios in New York and Boston. Really made soundtrack what it was. He's the guy that had the answer for everything. John's one of these guys that graduated way at the top of his class. So I'm really excited to talk with John today and hear about his life story and how he got into what he listens to in his everyday life. And as a guy that's been around professional musicians, the best of the best in New York and Boston, and film soundtracks and everything that he's done, I wanted to hear what he had to say, what he looks for in music. John is a really talented musician himself, an arranger and trombone player, and a mathematician, and just one of these guys that excels at everything, but sort of concentrated on building soundtrack into the empire that it is today. I've known him since he walked into a bookstore that I was playing at in probably 1983 or 84, 82. I don't know, way long ago. But the thing that I love about John is he's able to sort of set aside any kind of preconceptions and just get to the heart of why there's a problem. That's what he does so well in the recording industry. So, the building's on fire and everybody's running around, and John will say, well, wait, let's just look at it this way. And it invariably comes up with a great solution. So today we're going to talk with John Kiehl here on the Stereo Image. And so thank you so much again for coming on this week. John Kiehl, I want to ask you a quick question. When did it all start? We're going to go back to the very beginning. I'm talking with everyone about just how music is in their life and what they do, what they listen to when they're not working. In your case, 90% of your listening, I would assume, happened when you were working. But take me back to St. Louis as a child and what was happening there, and when did you become aware of music as a thing? As something separate besides just background noise on the radio.
Yeah. Well, as so much of my life, it has to do with my mother. As they say, if it's not one thing, it's your mother. And she was an amateur musician. She actually played stride piano, Michael. She could, her left hand would just go like, this is like the most natural thing in the world,
Wow.
picking off bass notes, that are,
Yeah.
you're not even looking at, because she took piano lessons in 1922,
Right. So she was playing the popular music of the day.
Exactly.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm getting over the shock of knowing you for over 40 years and not knowing your mother played stride piano.
and that she in my house growing up, I did not grow up in a musical house separate from the fact that my mother played piano, right? And so at high art in my house was my mother's musical taste, which was Broadway. It began and ended with Broadway, The Greatest Generation. She loved Tommy Dorsey. She loved Glenn Miller. For some reason, she loved Ella Fitzgerald. And that was the extent of music in my family.
Your father wasn't interested?
No, I had no real interest in it. I won't say he had a tin ear or, he was the deer hunter. He grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and went deer hunting every fall and pheasant hunting every spring. That's what he did. And so they met each other after World War II and settled down in Lancaster County and pumped out 3 kids.
The way you do.
Yeah. But back to music. I don't think I was allowed to think of music as a thing ever. It just was, it's just what intelligent people did. They had
Mhm.
music in their lives, you know?
Right.
So in the same way that I got swimming lessons, on Saturday morning, I was taken down to Washington University, which has a great music department, and got, these music theory classes that had been designed for junior high and high school kids, for free. If you were kind of from a family that treasured this kind of stuff, show up, you know?
Wow.
And so
Now,
I learned
was there music in your school, the schools that you attended, were there
I
music classes?
yes, I was in the baby boomer era, so I went to very large high schools, as all
Mhm.
the high schools surrounding St. Louis were very large. High schools surrounding Chicago were very large. I suspect Buffalo, right, where you were from,
Oh, yeah, sure.
in the 50s, schools were it was the baby boomers. There were 1,100 kids in my graduating class,
Wow.
3,800 kids in a 3-year high school. And so we had an orchestra, we had a band, we had a second band called the concert band that
Mhm.
was band members and orchestra. We had a 100-member marching band,
Wow.
you know. And so, yeah, it was very vibrant. Um, and in junior high school, the band leader was a trombonist, and I played trombone. So I even
Mhm.
studied privately with Milton Rudy. And I will say, as a side, I thought that someday I would have as beautiful a sound as Milton Rudy. And I thought all trombonists played as well as Milton Rudy. And it was heartbreaking growing up as an adult to realize I was never going to hear anyone who had as beautiful a sound as Milton Rudy,
Mhm.
you
Right,
know, but
right.
because that was my norm.
Sure.
And
Doesn't everyone play like Art Tatum? Uh,
no, exactly,
you know, it's
exactly.
you
So,
just yeah, yeah.
and the kids over at the other high school, by this time I'm in the suburbs of St. Louis. I was in Florissant Junior High School and Ferguson Junior High School. Their band leader was this concertizing trumpet player. And both men also played jazz. St. Louis is kind of, on the Mississippi River and has a big Dixieland,
Right.
uh, aesthetic that comes up from New Orleans. But Mike, it's kind of interesting to think when I listen to um, other people like you and other people that we know in common, like Greg Wardson and
Mhm.
whoever, who had discovered jazz by the time they were 12 or 16 years old.
Mhm.
My whole notion of jazz was Skitch Henderson and the Tonight Show Band.
Oh, mhm.
Before Johnny Carson's monologue, or maybe it was after his monologue, you'd get to hear 90 seconds of big band
Right.
music, and then
Yeah,
then it was off to bed.
yeah.
And there was no sense that I was on my way to being a professional musician or a jazz musician.
Right.
But no one was stopping me either.
Well, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. I mean, well, that's an important thing. I mean, seriously, I know how many frustrated musicians in their 30s and 40s and middle age that say, I always wanted to do this, but my parents said I had to go to medical school or I had
exactly.
to go to, law school. And I had to make a living. And it was a nice little hobby. And yeah, I think both. I mean, certainly in my case, I was never pushed into it. It was just sort of always a given. My father and mother just accepted that because I was playing gigs when I was 12 years old, that this was what I was going to do, and it was, and still remember my dad sitting me down when I wanted to go to Berkeley, when Oscar said you should go to Berkeley. That was a big thing to leave Buffalo, and we didn't have money. And how were we going to do this? And and he said, well, what do you want to go to Berkeley for? And I said, I want to be a good jazz musician. Basically, I don't know, at some point I said, I think I can be one of the best piano players ever. He said, that's what I want to hear. You know, he said, and so then it was never an issue. It was, I mean, obviously, Andy, you knew my dad and mom.
Right.
nobody supported me more, forever. I get the sense that it was never that kind of a thing, but your parents never said, "Oh, no, no, you get a business degree," and you need to, which is great.
The problem that I was up against and my parents, in doing the right thing for me, was up against, no matter how good a musician I was or was, uh, you know, looking like I might become,
Mhm.
I was 10 times the mathematician. You know what I mean?
Right.
It was real clear that I had another gift that society was gonna be prepared to pay me handsomely for,
Right. Sure.
you know? And so, um, that's, that's the path I went on. I went on to go to a trade school in Boston um, but music was a very serious hobby for me, and,
Right.
I played in all county band. That same Washington University that had these music theory classes on Saturday morning, every spring hosted solo contests. So every year I would spend all year practicing, some solo piece. Thoughts of Love by Arthur Pryor comes to mind, and you went down and competed, played your solo and got critiqued. And if I needed a piano accompaniment, my mother played the accompaniment part. And
Nice.
then what happened is I got too good for my mother as I started playing competition pieces that the piano parts were too beyond her ken, if you
Right.
will.
Sure.
And strangely enough, the Music Minus One record label started publishing play along records of these contest pieces. So
Oh, really?
my
Wow.
junior and senior year in high school, I went down to this competition with my portable record player and this record. And I started when it was my turn to play my trombone solo. I opened up the portable record player and started to put the record on there. And the judge said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, my mother can't play this, my accompanist cannot play the
Right.
piano piece, but I have this recording." And so there was this whole like timeout. This is we can't allow this, and finally cooler head prevails and said, "Look, we're not judging the piano performance
Right.
here
Exactly.
today. We're
Yeah.
judging your trombone playing."
We're not judging Jeannie Ebersol. Uh,
Exactly, exactly.
uh,
So, uh, but there I was once again on the cutting edge of technology.
yes, exactly. Exactly. Making technology work for you. Uh,
But, uh, and
but
strange
well,
you know
go
what, just as an aside, strangely enough, what I was playing that year was a cello sonata that had been transcribed for trombone,
ahead.
um, which is a strange way of characterizing it. It was written in tenor clef. All I had to do was teach myself how to read tenor clef. So, one day I was at the Port Authority here in New York where they play classical music to quell the masses. And all of a sudden, I found myself singing along with a cello piece, da 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 da. And I'm saying, why do I know this piece of music? How I've never heard this cello piece of music. And it was my contest piece from
Wow.
like, 20 years ago. So,
Right. Right.
uh,
But we'll go back to describing MIT as a trade school later. But I but so at the same time you're playing your cello and you're solving math equations beyond the masses. Um, what are you listening to music for your own enjoyment, or are you just sort of aware of it on the radio, or were you buying records or
to
anything
help
like?
you gotta to help set the scene, when I was in 5th grade, the first piece of music came out over the radio that felt like there was something new happening. and it
Mhm.
was ba 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 ba
Oh,
ding
yeah,
dong.
yeah, yeah.
It was Blue
Moon.
Moon.
Yeah, yeah.
Blue somehow that's the song that told me as a 12-year-old or 10-year-old, there's something else out there. Music is not, uh, Hello Young Lovers and
Right.
South Pacific and whatever, that there's this other thing, and it's part of pop culture, whatever pop culture is.
Right. Sure.
That's where I was in 5th grade, still making no contact with it. By ninth grade, it's "I Wanna Hold Your Hand" and the Beatles,
Mhm.
and people were still arguing whether or not that they could hear the Liverpool accent as they sang.
Uh-huh.
And I'm still not interested in it as a thing.
Right. Right.
And I'm certainly not interested in any of the jazz. I mean, m again, from my household, instrumental music was Tommy Dorsey,
Sure.
being a
Yeah,
trombone
yeah.
player,
Oh, yeah.
and I could never hit the C sharp, the theme song. I had to do it in key of B flat where the highest note was A. But the first event, Michael, there were a couple events like in 10th or 11th grade that just took my head off. One was going to see Buddy Rich.
Oh,
And
wow.
and this is Buddy Rich playing the West Side Story
Okay.
suite.
Sure.
This
Yeah.
is this is Buddy Rich playing "Mercy, Mercy, Mercy," the Phil
Uh-huh.
Wilson arrangement of the Cannonball Adderley
Right.
tune. Uh, I sat there and I just couldn't believe that anything could be this cool, this exciting, this
Yeah.
powerful, this magical.
Mhm.
Because Buddy had this conceit that he would always do is he would start playing a drum solo, blah blah blah,
Mhm.
blah, and then all of a sudden, all 15 members of the band would go reaching for some song and pulling up because he had either played the secret lick that told them what song they were gonna do next,
Listen.
or he yelled out 57,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
and he would go, and this reminds me, Mike, you need to interview Gary Anderson, who lives right there in Vegas with you, because Gary played lead alto for Buddy when he
Oh,
was
yeah, yeah, yeah,
when he was
yeah.
19 years old.
Right.
He's got stories, Mike.
Yeah, yeah. Everyone that's worked with Buddy has stories. Um,
So there was this Buddy Rich, and I couldn't process it, Mike. I couldn't
well,
process.
no, it's so much information. I mean, especially coming from the world that you were used to.
Yeah,
I mean, it's the first time I heard a band play a rock song at a wedding when I was 7 or 8 years old. I kept looking at them, trying to figure out how is this happening. This
yeah,
is stuff that comes out of a speaker at my house. You know what I
exactly,
mean? Um,
exactly.
and I never understood. I mean, I eventually understood how, but it's when it first. I mean, to have that as your like first experience is
Right,
an amazing thing
right.
because it's like saying, "Oh, well, again, does every big band sound this good?" You know, um,
Exactly.
but
But then,
wow,
some other experience is, Herb Alpert comes out in
mhm,
'66, I think.
yeah,
I went down to hear Herb Alpert play. Again, it was something I couldn't process, that here was a trombone player and a trumpet player playing music that was likable in some that competed. It competed with the Beatles, right?
right, right,
And it was freaking trombone,
yeah.
and then on the A&M label was this Brazilian guy, Sergio
Oh,
Mendes.
Skitch Mendes, yeah.
So I went down to hear Sergio Mendes, and that really took my head off. I just wasn't ready for the coolness of that,
Right,
the rhythm, and it was non-American rhythm.
right,
It was the sambas and all this other stuff, and I'd never heard any of that, and the magic between the sophistication of that rhythm, and then the complexity of the harmony, the Brazilian harmony, all that chromatic harmony.
right,
Uh, I said, "Oh my God, this is amazing, amazing stuff."
wow,
So that's those were the experiences that sort of lit up my imagination to what music could be or can be. But
Right.
did I think I was gonna be a professional musician? Not in the least. There wasn't anything in my life that was saying, "This is available to you, you just have to choose it," you know?
Right, right, right. And so I guess the obvious question is what happened next? I mean, you come up to Boston.
Well,
You
it sadly, and I'll try to keep this as short as
Yeah,
possible.
take all the time you want. This is a podcast. This is a
I,
podcast.
I, I usually tell people, um, here you got this nerdy little 18, 19-year old who's got some kind of natural aptitude for mathematics. I've advanced place math, which I know in this day and age is nothing, but in 1968, this
Mm,
was very few people were taking advanced placement things, and
mm,
my high school didn't know what to do with me, so I studied alone, all by myself, out of a textbook, and unfortunately got a 4 out of 5 on the calculus AP exam. And I go to MIT, having been totally self-taught, not really understanding anything about calculus, but being a good test taker. You can use question number 28 to fix your answer back on question 7 that you got
sure.
wrong, but they've asked you the same question in the
Right.
mirror, and all you say, "Oh, that's what that was," and so, um, but I usually say coyly that I went to the only school in the world that could kill a young man's love of mathematics. And they did. They
Wow.
just um, they they didn't show me that I was a mathematician. They didn't show me that you could love mathematics. They didn't show me that mathematics could be beautiful. They didn't show me that mathematics, they couldn't tell me what a mathematician did for a living, right? Um, and I remember at the end of my sophomore year, we were in math, this is now fourth semester math at MIT, and I advanced placed a semester. So this is like I'm in my fifth semester of mathematics at MIT. And I know you can't possibly imagine what that means, but we're not doing simple stuff.
Right.
Let's
Sure.
say,
Sure.
right.
Yeah. This is not
And
a and subtraction.
we we spent an entire hour arguing about um, if the ratio of the circumference of a circle to its diameter is pi, that's the definition of the number pi. All circles have the same ratio of circumference. That they were trying to teach us this trick that you could take a circle, give it infinite diameter, let it go to infinity, stretch
Mm,
it to infinity, and then measure the height of the function around the circumference, which is pi times infinity, and somehow you were going to magically come up with a number. And this was the answer to this question that we were being given. It was an issue of learning. It was learning that they were trying to teach us how to deal with the notion of infinity,
mm.
and infinity is a little tricky.
Right.
And um, but we argued for an entire hour about this makes no sense. You can't have infinite diameter, pi times infinity, dividing infinities out and blah, and claiming that you've calculated the area under this curve, under the surface. And sadly, the PhD candidate uh, recitation teacher we had just wasn't up for the challenge of teaching young people a fairly sophisticated concept.
Mhm.
He knew the answer, and he knew why it worked in his own head, but he couldn't
Yeah.
bring us along. All
Sure.
right. But I remember walking out into the hallway, and saying to myself, if this is what advanced mathematics is, I'm not a mathematician because this sure feels like philosophy. We're arguing
Mhm.
about the number of angels on the head of a pin.
Right.
And Michael, I can say that's the day, the end of my sophomore year, that's the day I said, I'm not like these guys. I get why I'm here. I do belong here because all this comes somewhat naturally to me. But I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life, but it ain't gonna be this.
Right.
You know? And, that's when I started letting the thought of, well, what else do I like? What else do I love?
Mhm.
And music was there. I said, well, I'm fascinated by music. I love music. And fortunately or unfortunately for me, is the MIT band leader of the jazz band of which I was a member was Herb Pomeroy.
Right. Right. Fortunately.
And so Herb showed me at every rehearsal that how you can love music and how you can devote your life to something you love. And maybe the paycheck's not what it should be, but it just won't ever be an issue because you're going to do what you love and it's going to feed you and it's going to nurture you. And what's curious about that part of the chapter, Mike, is I wasn't a good musician. Uh, I certainly couldn't improvise. Only
Mhm.
three members of the MIT big band could improvise. That was like that was like witchcraft back in
Right.
1968. And and so if if suddenly you started to show up at MIT jazz band rehearsals and it was clear that you had actually touched your instruments since the last rehearsal, in other words, you were clearly practicing your instrument to be
Right.
better,
Mhm.
you got what was called the lecture.
Mhm.
Herb would take you aside and
Mhm.
say, don't do what I did, because Herb dropped out of Harvard his
Yeah.
freshman year to go on the road with, Charlie Parker,
Yeah.
and he said, "Look, this is a gift. You are at MIT. Don't give this gift horse away. You can
Right.
always be a musician, get your degree, get your career. You can play your instrument every night of the week if you want, but you've won. You're
Yeah.
here at
Yeah.
MIT."
You won the
Well,
lottery.
I never got that lecture, Mike, 'cause it was real clear he didn't have to worry about me, thinking I
Well,
was a
we
musician.
can look at it as he knew that you were smart enough not to throw it away to become,
Exactly.
you know what I mean,
E
not to give up the MIT thing.
Right.
Um, but
Exactly.
but
So
oh god. Well, so you wound up like getting a dual major, right? Or
I did. I had a couple things happen. My senior year, I got mononucleosis. My fall of my senior really badly. I
Mhm.
lost 15 pounds. Weighed less I weighed 10 pounds less than what I weighed graduating from high school. Um, I would I went in the hospital or the infirmary on a Friday, um, not knowing why I had this raging sore throat, and by Sunday night, I couldn't swallow. I
Oh
mean,
well.
like, for me
Yeah.
to swallow, it was like, driving nails into my throat,
Mhm.
and so, um, they got that under control, and I think I ended up in the hospital for, 2 weeks,
Mm.
and I sort of never recovered from that. I was a walking zombie for the whole rest of my senior year,
Mhm.
and I was exhausted, and, I could have graduated, but had I graduated, it was 1972, and the Vietnam War was on, and
Right.
my number, which was, we were all given numbers based on a lottery that had happened the year before. My number was 47, and they were, all the way up to 100 or something. So clearly, I was gonna graduate and
Go right in.
go
Yeah.
right in. And so I was able to use the fact that I had this rough year, that I wasn't quite done with my double E degree,
Mhm.
um, and make a case to my, I want to say my parole board, but I mean my draft
Yeah.
board, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that that I needed another year to catch up and graduate and finish the deferment that I had.
Mm.
And the honest to God truth is, they didn't allow it. But um, because of bureaucracy, and I had been coached by the not the oh shoot the religious group over in Harvard Square, the men, not the Mennonites, the and not the Mormons, the other ones that began.
Not the Scientologists.
Exactly. But there was a group,
Uh-huh.
there was a group in Cambridge that was helping us,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
defer, and they said, "Look, by the time you can ask your local board to pass the review back to Massachusetts, where they're more used to college students, all this is going to take time, blah 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 blah." So this is what happens. It took like almost 6 months for me to get the final answer about, we're not going to let you take a fifth year. But by this time, I'm halfway through the fifth year. It's
Right.
January, and it's even more curious than that. I go in for the final word from the Boston draft board, and I sit there at the end of the table, and the gentlemen, they're like ignoring me. And it was very weird. And I just sat there. And finally, one guy said, maybe we should tell Mr. Kiehl what's going on, even though we shouldn't. And I'm saying, okay. And the other guy said, well, um, I don't see there's any harm in it, because the White House is going to make an announcement on Monday. This was on a Friday. He said the White House is going to announce on Monday that the draft is going away. So
Oh.
that's
So
what
you
happened.
single-handedly ended the draft.
Exactly. So
Good. Thank you for your service.
so I finished my fifth year. I got 2 degrees. I got a degree in electrical engineering, and I did manage to retain some of that. And I got a second degree in quote humanities.
Mhm.
That was a music concentration,
Right.
and and I hit the road. I came back to attend my graduation. I had already joined a band, and I was already playing at a Holiday Inn up in Portland, Maine,
Oh,
for
yeah.
and I thought I had died and gone to heaven. I had my own hotel room.
Huh.
I had room service whenever I wanted it. I was on the bandstand at night. I was just loving my new life as a 22-year-old road musician,
Wow.
uh, having never thought anything about that as a career
As a
choice,
career, right.
right? So,
Wow.
um,
You've hit the pinnacle, of the Holiday Inn circuit.
yes.
Uh, and that was a band that just played, I'm assuming like every band that I was ever in before I, went to Berkeley, it just played popular tunes and stuff that, Blood, Sweat, and Tears and stuff on the radio that had some horns, obviously, because of your trombone player. Were you
Well
playing trombone or bass at that time?
well, believe it or not, um, it was a very, very weird situation. As a trombone player, the year before, I was in a band that played locally in the Boston area. You can imagine being a trombone player. That's not the third or fourth instrument you add to a band.
No.
You know,
No.
I was in bands with like 7, 8, 9. I think one band there were 13 of us,
Sure.
all trying to get a paycheck at the end of the week from some nightclub. Um, and the year before, there was a gentleman who wanted to take this band I was in and put us out on the road and play Vegas and Atlantic City.
Wow.
And all the band members already had wives and mortgages and children, and we didn't want to go on the road. But that gentleman and I hit it off. And a year later, the woman who was in the band that I'm talking about, and this is our friend Jackie
Right.
Michael, she went and joined his, artist management organization, and she went out on the road and did Vegas and Atlantic
Mm.
City and New Orleans and all these places. And I barely knew her because as I was joining this band, to give you an idea, if you served alcohol in 1972, you had live music.
Right.
Every hotel, every
Oh, yeah.
bar. This band played at a bowling alley, Skippy White's bowling alley
Sure.
in
Right.
in
Famous.
right? You know, this was, and you can just hear the balls
Oh,
cracking,
yeah.
in the distance as you're playing Blood, Sweat, and Tears or whatever. And, so she and I just met each other sort of in passing. I joined the band and she left with this gentleman, and, she calls me, like a year later and says, "John, I don't know if you remember me, but this is Jackie from," the group was called Casper, like the ghost. And I
Nice.
said, "Jackie, sure, I remember." She says, well, Rob hasn't ever stopped talking about you. He really wants to get you because you were doing all the arrangements. I was every band I was ever in, I was the arranger because this is what trombone players do, you know.
Right.
You be all arrangers. We can get into this, but all trombone players become arrangers. And
Oh, yeah.
uh,
They follow the Glenn Miller mold.
there you go. And
They all
so,
know the story.
so Rob calls me up and he says, "John, I got this band I want to put you in. They've just got 4 more weeks on a year-long contract, but the bass player wants to leave. And so, no harm, no foul. The other 3 are very cool. They'll tolerate the fact that you don't know the repertoire, and maybe at the end of the month, you'll know the repertoire just as the band dissolves, but
Right.
it's a win-win-win for everybody, you
Mhm.
know? So, I go over and I'm sitting outside this club because they won't let me in, and I refuse to pay the $2 cover charge to join a band,
Sure.
so I'm waiting for Rob to show up, and I'm hearing what's clearly a rhythm section band. I'm hearing clavinet doing Stevie Wonder songs, and I'm hearing B3 organ doing other kinds of songs, and I said, "Well, Rob, you must have his idea must be to add horns to this group," you know?
Right.
Um and I go in and Rob comes and he says, "Well, John, this is the group. What do you think?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "So, what's the plan? You can't add just one trombone to this. Is there going to be a horn section or something?" He says, "Oh, no, no, John. The bass player's leaving, and you tell me you owned a bass?" And I said, "Yes, I do own a bass guitar, and I did play guitar in high school a little bit, so I can sort of manipulate my way around the bass." He says, "Well, John, we're just going to put you on stage playing but just do the best you can." And that's how I became a bass player,
Wow.
having never performed the bass really. I did play guitar and I studied classical guitar, so I knew notes, I knew the whole fretboard and,
Wow.
and I was a trombone player. I knew music, I knew how to count,
Well,
but
yeah.
it was such a challenge, Mike. Every night, I would, on my right hand, I would develop a blister on whatever finger I was using that night. So, Monday night it was my index finger. Tuesday night it was my middle finger. Thursday night it was my ring finger. Thursday night it was my pinky, and then by Friday night, the blister on my first finger. I think I'm the only bass player that plays bass with all 4 fingers because that's
Well,
the way I
yeah,
had to
and
play it.
and you also get the joy of finding new notes. Well, there's one of those up here.
Yeah, no,
No,
exactly.
I didn't know that. Uh,
And and these guys were so tolerant of me. I can the piano the clavinet player was almost a genius keyboard player. His name was Frank Satoli. I can
mm,
still remember Frank, and the drummer, typical Berkeley, wonderful Berkeley drummer named Tommy Cancelleri. and the little, beautiful blonde girl out front was named Carol Britt, and we had a ball for a
Mhm.
month, and, I started to become a bass player, and I can tell you quite honestly that that group, even though the group dissolved, Rob immediately found other musicians to keep the group alive. So the group continued to play for that entire summer. And I can remember 3 months later, um, playing in a club, and I was still convinced every song we played, I made at least one mistake. Like I didn't
Mhm.
go to the bridge when the band
Right.
the bridge.
Sure, sure. Yeah.
Being a member of the rhythm section is a complete different experience than being a member of the horn section,
Yes.
right? Is that I always think of it as the horn section, you're the surfer riding the wave, where you're not the wave,
Right.
and nor
Right.
do you have to think about any of that,
Right.
right? And so I had convinced myself 3 months later, so this is 12 weeks later when I was indeed somewhat capable of playing the repertoire, that it was okay to make mistakes. I had convinced myself that all this time I had just never noticed how many mistakes were coming out of the rhythm section
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
because because this is just what it is. When you play those many notes every
Oh,
night,
sure.
sure,
No
you're but,
problem.
even if you're getting them 98% right, you're still gonna make 20 wrong notes, and, uh, so, um, needless to say, um, no one valued my bass playing, but, uh, but it's even, Michael, it's even subtler than that because after the 2 years of me playing in these, cover bands, I settled down in Boston and seriously tried to understand jazz, and I started studying with Charlie Banacos, the great
Mhm.
jazz teacher.
Legend. Yeah.
And I studied both piano with Charlie and bass. And so at night, I had this little jazz trio that played places like Pooh's Pub and Michael's and Jack's and Riles and all these little vibrant clubs that Boston had because they have, Berkeley School of Music
Right.
there,
Yeah. And Boston
and
Conservatory and
so
New England's Conservatory and,
yeah,
Boston, yeah.
and the real book had just come out, like 1975, this illegal book that had all of this copyrighted jazz tunes
Mm.
all neatly bound together, and if you knew the secret password, you went down to Copy Cop on Boylston Street,
Yeah. Mhm.
said the secret word, gave them 20 bucks, and you got this beautiful bound edition of Miles tunes and,
Sure.
and,
And
so
weirdly, like some Michael Gibbs tunes
yeah,
because he was one of the transcribers.
there you go.
You know? You're like, why is like this song in the real book? Oh, he's one of the guys that wrote the songs down, Um, but yeah, I bought mine out of the back of a trunk on Boylston up more closer to Berkeley, like right
But
around
my
that.
in my life of becoming a bass player, so here we are, this is now I'm out of MIT, 2 years,
Mhm.
and I've been both a bass player and a trombone player for the 2 years. I am now studying jazz bass with Charlie Banacos, and I've got this group, and I've got this drummer who's still a dear friend of mine, Jerry Califf is his name, and, after every set, Jerry would just shake his head at me and say, John, there's absolutely nothing wrong with your bass playing, but there's nothing right about it either."
Oh, wow.
He said, you don't swing, man. You don't He
Right.
said, "You don't drag, you don't rush, you play all the right notes, but it just doesn't swing." And, so Jerry and I tried to, like, figure out what was wrong with my bass playing. It turned out it was as easy as buying a metronome, Mike. I
Uh-huh.
finally went out, bought a metronome, and brought it home, turned it on to, 90 beats a minute or
Right.
whatever, and started doing my Charlie Banacos exercises. And damn, if the freaking metronome, the minute I started playing, it would rush. And I'm saying, no, you know? And I would stop playing and I'd listen to the metronome, and it seemed like it was keeping good time. And then I'd start playing again, and now it would be behind, would be
Yeah.
dragging. I'm saying, what's going on here? I've bought the only metronome that can't keep time. I literally, Michael, I literally had this thought that
Wow.
it couldn't possibly be me, right?
Right. Right.
Uh,
Sure.
because the notes are coming effortlessly. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm playing, I'm a bass player. I'm playing one note at a time. How difficult can it be, right? And but I finally came to my senses and realized that this was the heart of what Jerry was sensing, is that I wasn't capable of creating or resonating with the pulse,
With the pulse, right.
right? And but I'm telling you, Michael, after I bought the metronome and after I trusted it,
Mhm.
within, I don't want to say 2 weeks, but certainly within 6 weeks, I was a swinging mofo.
Right.
And because the other trick, if anyone's listening and cares, after you play with a metronome for a week or two, put it at half speed and play with the metronome on 2 and 4.
Right.
Don't play with the metronome at half speed on 1 and 3. Think
Right.
of it as 2 and 4. And if you can do those exercises and keep in the pocket while the metronome is giving you the backbeat, that's the secret to really being master of the universe. And,
Yes. Seriously.
but it's not mysterious. It's not, it's not something that's not available to you. You just have to be honest with yourself, and someone sort of has to show you how sort of encumbered you are by
Right.
culture or something that has prevented you from truly making rhythm part of your body memory.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is, and it's certainly one of the things that I've spent the last couple of years on with our friend Jen here is talking to people about swinging and the way people swing differently, and but that foundation is really necessary. I mean, I remember a teacher that I had right before I went to Berkeley who told me the same thing. He said, "Put the metronome on 2 and 4, and it'll make it much more apparent because that's what the hi-hat's going to be,
Right.
and that's the pocket, and just try to fall into that." But so okay, so you're living high on the hog on the road with your own hotel room. um
Exactly.
and the band's changing personnel, but everything's going well. So I know much of these things, but um so how did you make the move into becoming a world recording magnate? How did soundtrack come about, and how did what when did you say, I don't need to play? I mean, when I not that I don't need to play, but I this other thing has taken over my life. You know what I
Well,
mean?
um, one of the reasons I was so angry with the American draft system is that I knew they weren't going to use me for my gifts. I knew that I was going to be an MIT graduate, computer programmer, mathematician, and they just didn't care. They were going to give me a gun and ship me off to Vietnam, right?
Right.
And I was so angry that the way the world works, that if I'm lucky, they're going to steal 2 years of my life and I'm going to have nothing to show for it.
Mhm.
And instead, the draft ends and I go out on the road, Michael, and in the blink of an eye, 2 years go by. Now, I've
Right.
had 2 years of fun,
Mhm.
playing Holiday Inns all the way down to Miami Beach and back.
Mhm.
And I literally said to myself, now, I said, John, you were so angry at the universe for wanting to steal 2 years of your life in the military, and you just gave away 2 years of your life to clubbing. I said,
Right.
so I literally said no to future gigs. And that's when I stayed in Boston and tried to figure how am I going to do something more serious with my life as a musician. And that,
Mm.
and of course, there's no logic here. That's when I decided I would study jazz with Charlie Banacos.
Right.
Oh, I know, I'll become a jazz musician.
That's where the real money is.
Exactly. So, um, but it was more of a commitment to stay in Boston.
Mhm.
Rob, in the meanwhile, had moved his office of artist management to a friend's studio in Jamaica Plain, and Rob was sort of trying to figure out how he could dig up work that would involve recording because he had had some experiences when um, he was a creative director, if you will, for Doc Severinsen, who had become nationally known because
Oh,
he's
sure.
the leader of this night show band. And so Doc had a nightclub act, and Rob is an idea man. And so Rob was coming up with arrangement ideas for Doc, and he would go into the studios in Manhattan with the best musicians in the world.
Right.
And he realized that within the music industry writ large is this little tiny island of sanity called the recording studio. And in Rob's word, he said, even the most harebrained musician kind of straightens up when he walks into a recording studio. And he was the one who said to me, because I was still playing in Rob's bands, he says, John, we don't want to be in the music business. We want to be in the recording studio business. And so Rob got commissioned to write a jingle for Paperback Booksmith uh,
Oh, yeah.
and in Harvard Square.
Yeah.
And so Rob is a tunesmith, but he can sort of scribble out the chords or what he's
Right.
doing in the same way if you've ever seen a Nashville uh,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
rhythm chart in Roman numerals, 1451 kind of thing. And so he calls me one day in my hotel room and says, John, I need to arrange this for rhythm section and brass section. And so that was my first arrangement. That's the first thing we did together. Um, and this was circa 75. The next year, I think we did 2 or 3 songs, Deering Ice Cream up in Maine. We did a commercial for the state of Pennsylvania's governor's anti-drug campaign, you know. Uh, and then we got and all of this is being done at Rob's friend's studio in Jamaica
Right.
Plain. It was called Dimension Sound. And the cool thing about being in the studio is here's me, Mr. Mediocre bass player, who can now swing. But um, all the musicians we're hiring are Boston's finest. We're hiring like Dick Johnson on clarinet, and we're hiring Kenny Wenzel on
Yeah.
everything else, and you know just Sal Spicola on tenor saxophone. We're hiring the best of the best, and these guys are being polite to me because I'm the guy who's written the arrangements. God bless them. And um, but then we get one of my big messages to all young people is you got to show up and you'll get lucky. We all get lucky, and WCVB was the ABC
Oh, yeah.
affiliate TV station in Boston, and they just changed hands. And the new businessmen who bought the ABC affiliate to get their license, they had to answer to Congress, strangely enough, and guarantee that 20 hours a week of Boston airtime of their new TV station would be by and for Boston
Right.
thing. So all of a sudden, there was this new group of creatives in town that needed to make TV shows. and they were up for it. Most of these guys came from the public television, WGBH, so they knew how to make good TV shows over there, GBH. But this was the first time a commercial station was going to make TV shows. And, Rob went out there, we went out there together and volunteered to be their creative source for music. And so we did the theme song for a morning talk show called The Good Day Show. As a matter of fact, Mike, right? It's like 3, 4 years later, you do the music for Sally.
Yeah, Nancy Merrill.
Nancy Merrill, right. It was that same group of people. And it was this relationship that started with this very tentative dipping of the toes in original production. We did documentaries. We did a show about teenage substance abuse called Dying to Grow Up. We did a show about there was a whole campaign called Body Talk or Body Language about health. But the big show was we did a show called This Was America, which was a very Ken Burns looking. They found these beautiful still pictures of turn of the century New England, and we wrote this beautiful music wall to wall. It started as 1 season, 7 episodes, and was so successful it went to 14 episodes. And that's how I got into the business. We were doing this music at this other studio, and at some point, Rob said, "We've got to go build our own studio, John." So that's what we did. We went and built Soundtrack.
Right. And the first one was on North Washington.
North Washington Street, which was a stone's throw from the Boston Gardens and the Celtics. And the Celtics used to get free steak dinners at the restaurant upstairs. So it was not unusual to be in the elevator with Larry Bird. Or I remember being in the elevator with Danny Ainge, which was the small guy. He was the little guy on the team, and he towered over you at like 6'8", and poor Robert Parrish at 6'11" had to stand with his head tilted sideways, so we were there for from 77 to 80 till 87. We were there for 10 years essentially. And again, I talk about getting lucky. One of the ways you get lucky is when the universe forces you to move on. And what happened in about year 7, they announced that they were going to do the big dig in Boston, where they were going to take the Central Artery, which was this elevated highway system, which makes Boston sort of look like Chicago whenever they show Chicago with the overhead subway systems, but these were highway systems. This was right outside our front door.
Right. I remember.
So we knew that the minute they started doing construction, not only would there be hell to pay for the noise, but nobody in their right mind on the other side of the highway system would want to come over to where we were.
Right, exactly.
So it forced us to go think about, so where do we really want to be?
Right.
And we were 10 years in, and Rob called me into his office one day and says, "John, if we're not careful, if we just go find another building, become tenants, sign another 10-year lease, another 10 years are going to by, we're going to have nothing to show for it.
Right.
We need to, the next step for us is we need to go buy something that's ours. And then maybe 34 years from now, we'll have something to retire from."
Right.
Because, the day we stop showing up, when you're in a service industry, the day you stop servicing clients, you don't get a paycheck, but at least we'll own something at the end. And I said, sounds fine to me. Mm-hmm. And then we got even luckier. Rob went to the closing of a property in the South End that was on the same amount of square feet that we owned, which I think was on the order of 12,000 square feet by then, or leased, right?
Mhm.
And
Right.
so Jeannie McGrail, our office manager, spent months and months and months, found this wonderful place. And at the signing, the other members of the condo of the building were still insisting that Rob sign away some sort of proof that we weren't going to make noise. We were not going to be noisy
Mhm.
neighbors,
Right.
that if we were noisy neighbors, we were going
Right.
to have to like compensate the buildings in
Sure.
some way. And with that, Rob stood up at the closing and said to Jeannie, "Find me another property." That
Right.
very day, she goes out, talks to another broker, and we find an entire building. So
Yeah.
we bought this 5-story building, um, and it's 30,000 square feet for less than we were going to pay for
For
the
12.
building that
Yeah.
was 12,000 square feet.
Right.
So um, you get, this is one of my big messages in life is you get lucky, you know,
Right.
uh,
Right.
and
Well, yeah. I mean, I see that about it. It's I the guys I work with, if they're doing their show upstairs from a disco in San Francisco, and if the guy that was looking to put a show off Broadway hadn't heard about them and went to see them because he was out there to see other people, they would have never gone to off Broadway and then never gone to Broadway. And, I mean, who knows what would have happened, but it was, it was just down to Richard Frankel walking in the door that and deciding, well, instead of going back to New York today, I'll go up and see these guys, you know, and
right
then I'll
now
see these
you're talking about Penn and Teller. This is
yeah,
Penn and Teller is upstairs doing their little
just doing their little magic show for four people,
right.
upstairs in a disco. Some nights, 30 people, some nights 100, some nights, but Teller was saying like, one night four
Right.
people were there, and and somebody said, well, it's the same thing with Norman Granz getting ridden to the airport in Montreal to take a flight out and hearing a live broadcast of Oscar from this nightclub in Montreal and having the cab driver take him over there to hear him. Just pure luck, I mean, Oscar, may have had an incredible career. I mean, he was Oscar Peterson,
Right.
but he might have never left Montreal, you
Yeah.
know? So yeah, luck plays a part in everything, I mean, if you hadn't walked in the Harvard Bookstore Cafe,
Well, I can tell that story, Michael, if you want. In 2007, the Harvard Bookstore Cafe was celebrating its 75th year, and they asked for people to submit stories about the Harvard Bookstore Cafe. I have it right here in front of me if you
really?
read it. Here's what I submitted to their 75th anniversary back in 2006. I said, dinner at the Harvard Bookstore Cafe on Newberry Street, circa 1983. My heart goes out to a poor Berkeley freshman who's playing a beat up upright piano somewhere between the stacks. I can't see him, but I can certainly hear him. And he's committing professional suicide right before my very ears. He's probably self taught, wearing his musical heart on his sleeve. His indiscretion, T for two. Definitely not jazz, and at least not jazz by a real book yardstick. The real book being the unofficial canon of the Boston jazz intelligentsia, an entirely illegal publication circulated underground and legitimized only by its Confederate sincerity. He could be the bravest musician I've heard in 15 years of hanging around Boston, though. You just don't play a soft shoe from the Roaring Twenties and expect to be mentioned in the same breath as Boston icons Charlie Mariano, Herb Pomeroy, Dick Johnson, and Phil Wilson. But I go and investigate. Between the stacks, a young man sits hunched over the keyboard, not looking like he's playing the piano so much as consuming it, clawing at it, spanking it. Man and machine come alive. What's missing is the Jacob's Ladder and Gene Wilder exclaiming, "It's alive." The tune ends, And the piano player sheepishly pulls out a little spiral notebook out of his breast pocket. He keeps a list of the songs he knows. Although memorized, he can't seem to remember what he remembers. He's been playing stride piano since he was 4 years old. He learned songs by watching the keys of his father's player piano rise and fall. Since he knows Girl Talk, my favorite Neil Hefti tune, I ask him if he knows my second favorite Neil Hefti tune, Cute. He references the notebooks and says, "Oh, sure." He says, "And so my 23-year love affair with Mike Jones was started."
Jeez. Wow. Wow. I didn't expect this. I thought a horrible story about bad fish, channel bass there and dinner. But for me, the gig was the greatest because I got to read books while I played the piano, and I got free dinner.
Well, there you go.
It paid $50 a night, which for a guy that worked in the mailroom for money at Berkeley, was paid like I think $35 a week.
Right.
That was, I'd hit the jackpot. It's 3 nights a week, $150. I know we've talked about it before, and but it's more, I more want to talk about your musical stuff, but you would send in people to hear me play, and I had no idea who you were at that time. But like Jeff Last came in, and all these people came in and said, John Kiehl sent me in to hear you. John Kiehl sent me in. I'm like, who the hell is John Kiehl? And then you came up to me like the weekend that I graduated from Berkeley and said, I've got this studio. And I thought, well, does he have an 8-track in his attic, or what the hell is this all about? And then I went down to 77 North Washington, and it was, it was something out of a movie to me. There's, these beautiful secretaries running around, and all these famous people. And, and it really, I just told this story a couple weeks ago to some people. I was giving a little talk, and I said, it really was insanely. This doesn't happen to anyone. I walk in, I see you. You say, "This is my place. What are you doing tomorrow?" "Well, do you want to play on a jingle?" "Sure." Well, what are you going to do? "I don't know. Maybe go back to Buffalo. I don't know what I'm going to do." "Well, you want to make a little demo tape? We'll send it to this agent." Sure. And then I get a gig at, then Bill Curtis calls me up, and I suddenly start working full time, and I'm doing jingles and working. That doesn't happen to anyone, But
Michael, what year did you graduate?
86,
86.
85, 86 officially. I was pretty much done in 85, but I went back and cleaned up by 86.
Hang on just one second. I just happened to hang on, 85. Yeah, 85, you graduated, and then, Michael, we took it up a notch. This Italian gentleman who was the official piano tuner of the Boston Pops and the New England Conservatory, named Falcone.
Yeah.
He started building his own concert grand 9-foot pianos up in Lynn, or Haverhill.
Yeah.
And so we rented a 9-foot Falcone piano. I got introduced to a man in New York City who had the new digital reel tape recorders. He delivered the digital tape recorder, and we recorded you for like a week, I think.
After I would play at the Ritz and then come over to Soundtrack.
Yeah.
And work on it.
And it was, this is like it's 1986 or whatever. It was in the fall, according to my checks here for.
I remember going up to Haverhill with you to look at the factory.
Yeah, I remember that.
And meet him and everything. I mean, that piano was one of the best sounding instruments I ever played. And it's funny, the worst thing about it was the action. That roar action. I never got comfortable with it, and they were so proud of this German action that they put in the piano,
Right.
and the piano had a gorgeous sound,
Yep. Yep.
but it just it never felt right. And but they stayed in business for quite a while. I
Yep.
mean, I think that I don't know if they're still making pianos themselves, or they've sort of they somehow were involved with the reacquiring of Mason and Hamlin and all this other stuff.
Mhm.
But he was a fascinating guy. Yeah. But yeah, I remember that well. I remember countless hours trying to make computer shit work in the studio. While we all sat around and everyone tried to figure out how to get something going. But all right. Well, I'm gonna we're way over time, but it doesn't matter. We could make this as long as we want. Um, but I wanted to ask, so you're studying with Charlie Banacos. You got a good facility on the instrument. You're not doing it for a living. You're hearing nothing but music around you all the time in the studio. Um, just tell me what are the things that you like to listen to for yourself? I mean, what's on your what you know? I mean, without being completely Gen X or Gen Z or whatever the hell we're up to now. But like, what do you listen to? What's on your playlist of stuff that you go to?
I There's no genre that I treasure above all the rest.
Mhm.
Um, I'm a bit of a snob. I really pick and choose. Like, for example, let's take a group like Weather Report, right?
Mhm. Sure.
Um, Please don't make me sit and listen to a Weather Report album, but um, Birdland
Right.
has got to be one of the most genius outputs of the human mind I've ever
Right. Sure. Sure.
right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And what's that it's followed, I think, immediately by some ballad, a remark you made or something
Oh,
like
Archimede. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I listen to that and I can't comprehend what mind came up with this kind of stillness. Like, how do you find the chords
Right.
that
Right.
that that orchestrate whatever that mood is that that song is about, you know?
Right.
That's and so those are 2 songs that I will listen to endlessly,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Uh,
I will, um during COVID, I stopped pretending like I knew who Beethoven was, right?
uh-huh.
And I said, "You know what? Once and for all, I'm gonna listen to all 9 symphonies as if it was a homework assignment, and I'm gonna analyze in a sketch way every movement, and I'm gonna form an opinion, um, and here's what I've concluded. The 5th symphony is without a doubt, the most genius outpouring of human thought ever.
Wow.
Um,
Uh-huh.
um, Followed close behind by the Ninth
Right.
Symphony,
Right.
right?
Sure. Yeah.
The 3rd Symphony, it sounds like Mozart, just a little beefier. There's absolutely no reason to listen to the 1st, 2nd, or 4th Symphony. Uh, and then after between the 5th and the Ninth Symphonies are these really magical moments. The 1st movement of the 6th Symphony.
Mhm.
The most magical thing for me is the 2nd movement of the 7th Symphony,
Right.
which has, a theme and then a counter melody that just blows my mind. Ju
Mhm.
just, again, like, what what kind of mind conceives of putting notes together this way, that
Right.
this is the net result? And, oh, by the way, let's not forget that the man is going deaf the whole
Right.
time. So
Right.
that by
Yeah.
the time we get to the Ninth Symphony, he hasn't heard a single thing except in his head,
Intent. Yes.
right? Uh,
It's amazing.
and, um, but I l you know, Ava Cassidy's "Fields of Gold." I
Mhm.
could listen to that song. You could just put that on an endless loop. Michael McDonald has a ballad called "I Can Let Go Now." You could put that on an endless loop, and I would love it. Um, I love Earth, Wind& and Fire, those albums right there in the mid-70s. I remember, I my alarm clock around 1985 would wake me up with music. I'd set it for 7 o'clock, and it would wake me up, and there was this morning, I was half asleep, half awake, and I was dreaming, like, the most gorgeous popular music I'd ever heard in my life. The rhythm was unbelievably complex and in the groove, and there's, like, amazing horn parts, and some guy singing in the stratosphere like a
Uh-huh.
castrati, and I literally thought I had died and gone to heaven, Michael.
Uh-huh.
I thought I was dreaming.
Uh-huh.
But it was someone the Earth, Wind& and Fire album had just come out, and the
Uh-huh.
DJ had dropped the needle. This is the album with Fantasy on
Oh,
it,
yeah.
Jupiter, and I was so ecstatic that I was gonna be able to go out and buy this album,
Uh-huh.
and Michael, I'm still listening to that album over and over again, you know, sometimes I listen to just what the guitar player is playing. Sometimes I listen to just what the bass player is
Right.
playing. And I'm asking myself, what has to be true for 5 or 7 men to come into a room and make that happen,
Mhm.
you know? Uh, sort of
Yeah.
knowing I was never ever gonna be part of whatever that magic is, you know?
Well, yeah, but also you're a major part of it by bringing them together and
Yes.
making it happen and letting it happen because, again, don't discount the luck. You know, I mean, you get guys. I've been in rooms with guys playing stuff where there's not even really any kind of a sense of camaraderie or fellowship or anything. But then you count the tune in, and all of a sudden everybody's on the same wavelength and answering each other and listening. And that's the way good stuff. I mean, that's the at least for me, that's the way the best stuff happens. And a lot of it, it's not all luck. I mean, you can take many tracks by many famous old rockers that spent many months in the studio to get the 30 seconds of luck from the 1800 hours of recording. You
Right.
know, so as you know better than anyone, but um, well, I'm gonna call it because it's
Okay.
been. It, I mean, I there's no there's n- everything that you've done, everything that you've talked about is really good and really answers a lot of questions. And you know, unless you want, do you have anything you want to like sum up music in your life that's a pull quote or anything? Or I mean, we have plenty of great stuff. It's up to you.
Um, no, Michael, I'm just I'm very I'm very happy
Mhm.
with how I ran my life.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was luck. And I can't even say it was a lot of courage. I've often said everything that's right in my life is something that I took from my mother as whole cloth.
Mhm.
Because she was the one who said, "Look, your life is this a book of empty pages. Just go fill it up one page at a time."
Wow.
And that's what I did. I've lived a very serious life. I mean, I've not wasted much time,
No.
and it's rewarded me. And I've also said, Michael, more than I love music, I love musicians, and
Mhm.
I love being around you guys.
Yeah.
And uh,
Well, right back at you. I mean, I've never met anyone who is that it has met you that doesn't love you. You know what I mean? It's the case with everyone. Oh, John. Oh, Jesus, I love John. I mean, that's what they'll always say because you're always there with the voice of reason, and let's make this happen. Let's make it work. And when shit's going down in three different studios at the same time, and everyone's running around with their hair on fire, you're the person that they would always go to, and you just walk in with this calm, peaceful attitude, saying, "Well, let's just try rebooting this. Let's just try plugging this back in. Let's try." You know what I mean? And it's always, I mean, it's a wonderful. It's you were the heart of all of that stuff for everyone, and still are. I mean, you got another 25, 30 years. So,
I hope so, Mike, and I'm hoping to do it. I'm hoping to do it on another level. I'm hoping
right.
to do it with some personal endowment where I don't have to like explain to someone why I'm going to go do it this way.
Right, right,
You
right.
know?
So again, John, thank you so much for coming on, and it's been so wonderful to hear all of your stories and your journey through music. And we'll have you back, and we'll hear more because I know there's a lot more there.
Cool.